Welcome to the Modern Pet Retailer, where independent pet retailers come together to run better businesses, make smarter decisions, and stop leaving money on the table. Welcome to the Modern Pet Retailer. This week, we are closing out our SOP business process conversations that we've been covering for the last 3 weeks, evaluating our processes, improving systems, reducing our owner dependency. We're going to close all of that out with daily routines. An SOP tells your team what to do. A daily routine is what makes sure it actually happens. The stores that feel consistent to our customers usually have routines and checklists in place so that they have the same exact experience every time. Every time they walk through the door, they're greeted similarly. Everything looks consistently clean or stocked. All of that can be a checklist. It doesn't have to be some dream. You can just set it in a checklist and forget it. We're going to jump into like why daily routines are very important and how they're the foundation of everything else, and how to kind of take some of the things that are harder to explain. Maybe it is a cleaning checklist or the way the store needs to look presented wise. It can be hard to describe. So we're going to talk about how to turn those into checklists and routines so that your staff can take those over and it looks exactly how you want it to every single day. So why are these very important? SOPs, which we've talked in length about in this series, they have to have that's your structure, and then the routines are based off of the SOP. So an example is the warehouse receiving that we went over in depth. The SOP tells you how to perform that job, and then there are checklists based off of different tasks that you have to cover. When I receive this product, did I go through step A, step B, step C? Or when you're done with the warehouse for the day, is it clean to the expectation we need it? These are all part of the warehouse SOP, but checklists within there to kind of beef up and make sure that everything is very clear and specific and guided in these playbooks. The daily routine is how your standards get enforced without you having to enforce them or personally do them every day. So if you're coming into your store every day, opening it because you feel like you're the only one that can, I promise you there is a way for you to hand that off once you find trustworthy employees that can show up consistently on time, can be trusted with register checklists, then you can hand that responsibility off and take some of the burden off of you with these routines. It's the single most powerful tool for reducing your owner dependency because a store with a strong daily rhythm does not need the owner present to start, run, or end the day and close correctly. Dave, from everything we've covered over the last 3 weeks, where do daily routines sit in the hierarchy of systems that we've discussed?
The way I think of it from top to bottom is the way that you think, plan, and act. This is act, right? This is the part that touches the people that are going to do the job. So our culture is kind of like the meta processing, the thinking about thinking and what do you want of your store and how to present the store. And the SOPs represent the sort of the strategic organization. You have to how to think and plan and understand the sequence of operations, and the checklist or routine that you're talking about is the most tactical. This is the part, as I say, where the rubber meets the road. This is the part where your front staff, your employees, the people that are doing the jobs on a day to day have the guidance and guidelines to take care of the customers, to make sure the store is prepared. So from a hierarchy of things, this is the most tactical. So you're not building SOPs every day. You're not thinking about developing your culture every day. These are longer term things that the owners should be doing and planning and building. The routine and checklist are those things that occur every single day or multiple times a day, maybe once a week, but it all is all about the, the things getting done. So it's kind of like the broadest part of the system. It's the doing. That's kind of the way that I look at the difference between our routines that happen on a daily basis and the SOPs, and then of course the culture.
Yeah, I noticed that the checklist or routines get looked at more consistently by the staff to make sure that almost works like a mental math in their head. They check them more frequently because it's like, yes, I did this. Yes, I did this. Yes, I did this. Whereas the SOP is giving you guidance on how to perform the task. So once you have the task memorized, they don't reference the SOP as much unless they need to find those checklists within it. So it's definitely, like you said, the tactical part of this.
Yeah. And I think the SOP kind of gets down to like, it's really part of your training and your development of new employees. And the checklist and routine is, like you said, just kind of something you review to make sure things are done in completely or thoroughly. And the checklist is never designed to walk you through the whole process step by step. It's just to make sure the key items are looked at and addressed in the way they should be.
So let's get down to the first kind of example of which you can build a routine within your store. So if you're an owner that's opening your store every day, but you have an employee that you could possibly transfer this off to, this is going to be for your ears. And if you don't have anything built, but you have a different person coming in to open every day, and maybe the store looks different every day, this will also be for you. Opening is obviously more than just opening your doors. You have to start a standard. So it's the openers or it's setting the energy of the store. They're setting the energy of the day. If the place looks good, the expectations for every customer and every employee who walks in after, this is what they're setting basically. And if you execute it poorly, everything can seem rush. It could put your opener in a bad situation where they have to play catch up after your doors are open, but it can feel incomplete and it just stems out to the rest of the team after that if you have that poor execution. So having a rhythm is important. So we have at Braxton's a physical environment checklist for our team leads. They're checking look, feel, and that could be like the lights, the temperature. We don't have music at the store, but if you have music, cleanliness, product facing, signage, and they're validating that through a checklist. The operational readiness is probably what most of you have in place. So the opener comes in and they unlock the doors, they get their hash registers ready and processed, and that's the core thing, and then they open the doors for customers. But all of that has to work, otherwise you can't open for business. So you have that aspect. And then you have your team readiness. If you have a bigger team, you could have team cadence meetings beforehand. We use a employee newsletter that basically gives them kind of all the information they have for a month to save our daily talks. But they reference that in the morning. They'll reference shift notes, reference their schedule if need be, and then the team lead will assign what we'll talk about later is to our task list for our retail staff to own which zone they're in. And we have all of that written out and formalized in a checklist or an SOP so that I don't have to be here every day. Dave doesn't have to be here every day to open the store. And the nice thing is, since I forget how to do those things, since I don't have to do them every day, I have those documents to fall back on and I can open the store as consistently as anybody else, even though it's not something I regularly practice. Yeah. So for Braxton's, like a goal to be open is the openers here about 15 to 20 minutes early before our doors open and gets that done. A sloppy open can cost us some recovery time on the back end once the doors are open, like, "Ooh, sorry, let me get the bath ready for you," or, "I don't have the registers open, I can't cash you out right now." So all of that is preventable because we have these in place. So 15, 20 minutes takes to open the store. We don't require employees to be here an hour before the hand to prep anything. Now, if you have a pet store that has animals, obviously, that's probably gonna be a little bit different if you sell live animals, but it's nice that we can cut down on our labor costs because we have these in place.
You alluded to it, you talked about it. I think it's really important to reiterate is it sets the tone for the day. We've all had days where something went wrong. You went out to the car, it had a flat tire, your child spun your morning out of control. And I think what happens is that when we start the day wrong, that sets the energy for the day. But when we're talking about the store, we are representing ourselves to our customers. And if the day starts wrong, that just spins out of control. Your opener is rushed because they got there late. They didn't have a checklist. Things were not the way they expected them to be. And then that rubs off on the next employee. And then they're both frustrated. And then the customers start coming to the store and they feel the energy. That's frustration. So the walkthrough, the routine, and the checklist smooths things out. So there's a known entity every single morning and the routine just clicks. Boom, boom, boom. Everything's done, ready to open. And, our hours have been short since the pandemic and just for staffing. So we are 9:30 to 5:30 every day. So when we're all prepped and ready to go, I like the ability to have the doors open 5 minutes before customers expect so that, we have people waiting, and instead of having to wait another 5 minutes to 9:30, typically we'll be opening the doors at 9:25 or just a few minutes early, especially if someone's out there waiting. So this kind of just wanted to reiterate, like, you are actually setting the energy of the whole store and what you're representing to your customers by having a really smooth entry point and routine that helps your employees and yourself, have a nice clear mind of what you're doing that day.
Setting an opening and formal checklist for opening can be as simple as the next day you work, just write down step by step as soon as you enter the building what you're doing, and then you can literally have it written out within however long it takes you to open the store, and then that you can work on that process from there. As we've discussed the last 3 weeks, how you can use AI to improve the readability of it, and it can help you articulate things that you're not thinking of that you do steps wise that are still important, but you didn't write down. So all of those things. So why wait till the next day you open to write these formal opening processes and get some of this off of your plate? Now, with the opening conversation, you have the closing conversation because a good closing shift, a good closing routine can set your opener up for success. And if we have a poor process on the back end, that makes that 15 or 20 minutes longer in the morning that we have to fix the shelves or reset something, or maybe the bath didn't get completely done. A bad closing will set up a bad opening.
I think that goes to the point of setting yourself and your team up for success. And the opening is most important for customer facing because you're just minutes before the customers show up. Closing is important to set your morning up right. So I agree. These are both like equally important and they all have to do with being completely ready for the customers to start entering the store.
So our closing process is about as simple as it's the opening process. It's in reverse. We have a physical reset. So the entire day, employees will work through the cleaning checklist that we're going to kind of detail a little later, which helps make the end of day go by faster if they keep on top of that responsibility. Product being faced, floors swept, the end of day chores being completed, bathrooms looking good, dog wash cleaned. Then you have the operational close, which is the opening and backwards. You're reconciling your registers, your end of day reports are pulled, your systems are logged out, then the building's safely secured. And then communication handoff, which is something that is always the hardest part of these routines because it depends. We have a couple different communication options, and this is where things fall through the cracks, which we're going to get to a little later. But having some kind of communication handoff, anything the opening team needs to be documented and visible for the next shift or for the next day. Now, Dave, communication, like I just said, was has always been a challenge. It's as long as you have people in place, everybody has a different way they prefer to communicate. It's hard to get everybody on the same team when it comes to implementing systems with communication. It's like no matter what we implement, things still get missed. What's your take on this issue and why it's such a struggle?
Communication is probably one of the most prominent things that we have heard historically from employees that needs to be addressed. And that even as we build communication systems and refine them, it's about training, like making sure all the employees are using the systems as expected. So like a story of one of the earliest nailing down communication is for scheduling years and years ago, kind of hand scheduling, right? And you have your week and you'd fill in the names of the people that would be there that week and the hours that they were going to work. And employees have their needs. They need days off. They need, maybe they have to leave half a day. There's a variety of things that the employees rather need in order to take care of themselves. And the methodology was just a scrap paper note thrown on a desk. And the problem is, we've talked about this in the past, and I think we're going to address it here in the future as well. Is like, what are the systems you need in place in order to have a paper trail, something that is obvious and durable, and sticky notes on a desk are not that. And you talked about varieties of communication. Is do you text the manager? Do you call the manager? Do you throw a sticky note on the desk? Do you just verbally tell them in passing midday when everybody's busy? No one's going to remember that. So we realized, quite a long time ago that a communication system that was both simple and easy to use and durable, we just for that particular scenario, scheduling people, we said the only way that you can communicate time off requests is email or text to the manager. So you can only text one person and you can only email one person. And this way, we had a paper trail that immediately nailed down, was the communication timely and accurate? And if it was the manager's fault, we fixed it. And if it was the employee's fault, they fixed it. So that's the kind of level of simplicity in EV as we migrate through various systems that we've implemented with a different team and new people. We have a chat and we have a Google form, and we don't really allow sticky notes stuck around. Although I think that's where you're going, Tiff, is like occasionally they are still used and left, and that just becomes a training and coaching issue to not really allow your employees to drive the systems. It's okay to take a look at it and see if your systems are just not easy enough to use. But I like the chat and I like the note system because these are what I call durable, right? They're in place. They last over time. They don't disappear. Gives you an audit trail. You can't forget it. You can't lose it. It can't get knocked off the desk. It's in one place, easy to access, easy for everybody to use. So it is a challenge, and it does continuously require training and coaching to make sure that everybody's on board. But that's the goal, is move towards simplicity and ease of use and away from everybody does their own form of communication. And you owe it to your employees too. Tiff talked about the monthly employee newsletter. It's written every month. It has the details of things that are new and changing. And then it's sent out to all the employees, and it's also printed and hung behind the register where everybody has access to it all the time. So there's absolutely no reason, as we communicate with employees, that they missed it, they couldn't see it, it wasn't there. It's always in the same place every single month. Communication goes both ways, and the requirements go both ways in order to have a really good system.
I believe the correct answer is that I'm the reason that communication falls through. Yeah, you said it a couple weeks ago. You said you get what you tolerate, and I will come in and I will allow employees to approach me with questions or concerns, which we have systems built in place. And I will sit there and prioritize it because they're bringing it to me physically instead of redirecting them to like, hey, can you put that in the chat? Hey, can you put that in the note system? Whatever the case is. I bring on my own frustrations with communication in our specific location, but there's some days that I'm really good about it. We have a payroll and scheduling system that is built through a company called Home Base, and they have a messaging system within it, and they have literally request off trade shifts. So we cut down the communication between, hey, can I have the X day off? There's no reason to verbalize it. There's no reason to email me about it. You can just put it into Home Base, and it makes it so I can't even schedule you, or it flags it if it's a day that I can't give you off or something. It automates that whole system. That was one way that I'm like, if you tell me that you need a day off, whether it's through the note system, any of our other digital products, I'd be like, no, just home base. I'm going to forget to check there before I make the schedule. Just put it in home base. And then I can't even physically mess it up. But I'm always the one that I'm like, oh, why can't you just use the note system? But every time they bring me something, they get immediate read feedback and reward because I'm answering their question. So if you find yourself building these systems and you're still getting questions brought to you or things that need to be put in the chat for other shifts, reflect personally because usually it's you get what you allow.
You are the source of all my problems.
You're the fire putter outer, so you get like the more concerning ones and it's like my hair's on fire, but like is it really on fire? Half of that is like how do we teach people what important is, prioritization is. And then on the opposite spectrum of that, if they don't think it's that important, but it actually is important, how do we get them to articulate that within our system? So that's a whole nother topic, a whole nother issue, but moving on. So the real focus of daily routines, opening and closing, are kind of the bookends. The daily routine is everything in between. The recurring tasks, the rhythms, the non negotiables that define what your store feels like and operates like every single day. So if you are a store that has animals and habitats and stuff to care for, obviously this is going to fall into these. You're going to need checklists of like, how do you take care of the bunnies? What does that actually look like? How to maintain their habitat, feeding, cleaning, health checks. We have our internal task list for our store that is our cleaning, facing, stocking, and the zone ownership, which will kind of give an example or talk through a little bit. Customer follow ups, like these are non negotiable. If we get an email from the website, you absolutely have to get back with that customer in a timely manner. But all of that's checklist and any other daily communication, or what does your team need to know today that was not on the schedule or anything like that. The danger of informal daily routines, like I said, if you don't have anything written out and you have an employee comes in to open the store, it lives in somebody's head, so it becomes, like, personality dependent. Your best employee has their own version of the daily routine, and that works because of who they are, but not because of it's a system, it's because they're continually the only one that does it, and you have that key man risk. Right now, our delivery driver's on vacation, and he has his we have a checklist for the delivery process, and he's the one that always owns that, so when he is not here, since we don't train everybody on it, like, things get missed, and it's like people don't know to go look for the checklist, so rotating your key man out every now and then, like, not letting them take the process, not letting them own the process, there's no reason for that to happen, so that's kind of something we're seeing right now that we need to fix. And Dave, can you talk about what happens to a store's daily operation over time when routines are informal versus documented?
Yeah, and this also goes back to what we are just talking about is you get what you tolerate, not necessarily what you expect. So if I go back a little bit to what you were just talking about, and delivery is a good example of that, is if our delivery driver has our system and he understands it, he does it, and everything's written down, the next driver, yeah, we have to train them, right? Give them the basics of the SOP, but then they can just run the checklist. What are the steps? What do they have to do? How do they organize their delivery route and everything else? If we let the primary delivery driver not just necessarily formulate their own SOPs and checklist, but informally modify them, let's say, like not like, oh, I know how to do it better. So I'm just going to do it my way and not refine the process. So it's never updated. This is a big risk. So I like what you're saying about rotating different people in. But the biggest problem, going back to your question about informal, is what I would call the individual or proprietary knowledge. That is when very few or one person does the job repeatedly and they don't create a system out of it, versus institutional knowledge, which is when you formalize the process, when you do the SOP, the individual proprietary knowledge is dangerous, right? Because we don't have consistency. We have single point of failure, key man risk, right? Somebody owns that information. And if they're not available, then it either just doesn't get done or it doesn't get done in a way that's efficient or accurate or consistent, and it affects our customers. There's so many carry on effects when we have a shift of personnel without these checklists and routines built in off of our SOPs. As a side note, we were talking about how the owner gets away from the whole system and takes their valuable time into running the business and making sure you're getting clients, making sure you're doing the deals, the things that might be more important than just doing deliveries or helping customers. All the stuff we're talking about today, if it's not done well, it makes it almost impossible for the owner or key person to free up their time. They're always putting out the fires. They're always hand holding. They're always fixing. They're the only person that can take over. If one person was trained to do it and that one person's not there, now the owner has to do it. So this is a gateway to that freedom that we were talking about, that the ability to be flexible and to do the more important jobs or take time to yourself, whatever it is that you most need. But that's where I would look at it is we want to move away from individual knowledge towards a system because the individual knowledge, it's just a higher level of risk and it produces inconsistent results. So those two things is both having a system in place and, to your point, doing a little bit of cross training to make sure that two things happen when you cross train. You reduce risk because you have more people that can do it, and you increase the likelihood that the process is improved because you have somebody that's been doing it regularly. You're training somebody else to do it. They can both have input when they start to understand the system, and then the system can be refined. If one person does it for years and years and years and nobody else is involved, times change, things change, processes change, software changes, and that one person may never have an interest in improving the system. So cross training other people into that system does those two things. It reduces your risk of failure, and it increases your ability to improve your system overall. Definitely moving away from individual into institutionals. It's a key focus, and it's so important to have your business run smoothly. I don't know if we mentioned it before, but this just kind of jumped in my mind, thinking more and more about the idea of, regardless of if you ever wanted to sell your business, run your business as if you were going to sell it, which means it's not dependent on you. Your business will be easier to run and so much more valuable when you implement these things all the way down to the routine task list, checklists part of the system.
Yeah, excellent point. So I kind of want to go over what are the Braxton's cadence is because I feel like I had somebody ask me for a school project, what's my day look like as a retail manager or something like that. And I'm like, when you first asked that question, I'm like, every day is so different and I'm doing something different every day. And I thought the same thing when I was on the retail floor. But if you sit and document it, everything's pretty much the same every day. Just small details get moved around. You talk to a customer for an hour or a rep going for an hour longer than you anticipated. And now you have to shift the rest of your day. But the core bones are always still the same. So you can still build these routines around those bones. So, like I said, at the beginning, we have our key holders and our team leads coming in first. They're opening the doors, getting the registers ready, turn the lights on, all of those the listicle type things. Team leads checking the store appearance and make sure that the closing procedures and everything was followed up on. And then we have receiving, and then you have your retail staff stocking that received product, and then tending to customers, which is where your imbalance gets on the retail floor. One person's working with a customer for about an hour, and then one person's trying to fill the gap with stocking or something like that. That's where it can feel inconsistent, but the core tasks are still the same. Outgoing deliveries are prepped, special orders are called, the task list is worked throughout the day, and then the end of day responsibilities and the closing checklist. All of those things I just listed have SOPs or checklists written around them. So if I was the only one coming in that day, I could execute on every single one of those things. Not that I want to do that. It's all written out. It's pretty much the same every single day with the small details changed. And Dave, of our routines, which of these took the longest to formalize, you think?
So when I look at all of the stuff that we've built and developed over the last several years, I was mentioning earlier that sort of the front staff facing information is both the most voluminous and the one that occurs the most often. So I think the daily routine, our daily checklist, is the one that was probably took the longest to formalize. And I think there are two things to it is the sheer volume, right? There's so many different tasks. And then the iterations, like figuring out what was working, how to communicate, how to define done, what's the ideal outcome that we're looking for. You mentioned front straighten and clean store, and it's easy to say, it's hard to communicate, right? So you can say clean the store, and that could mean 10 different things to 10 different people. So formalizing something that simple actually is difficult, right? Because clean the store, somebody could just sweep. Maybe you wanted it mopped. Maybe you wanted the shelves wiped down. Maybe you wanted the product dusted. Everybody's going to have a different idea what that means. So formalizing the daily routines and the daily tasks and checklists, I think is the most comprehensive, and iterating not only on the communication side and the languaging side of what things mean, but for us, the system side and the technology side, going from a basic Google sheet and or paper, the way it used to be done as well. It was Google Sheets or Excel. Manager would set out all tasks and then manually assign tasks to different people. And then maybe they would get checked off and maybe they wouldn't by the employee. Maybe they would be revisited or maybe not by the manager. So it was a really good start, but it was fundamentally broken because there was no audit or paper trail to follow up and double check. And it was just very clunky. And all of these things I've talked about, ease of use and simplification. The the best systems you use is the one that will get used, right? So we've simplified, right? So now it went from Excel to Google Sheets with some automation on the back end. Then we went to Zone, which I really love the Zone idea. Different employees will get different areas of responsibilities and they own it. Then we had the capture for the feedback loop. Employees would check it off and that would be available for review by team lead the next morning. So this is a pretty robust system, but there's such breadth to it. There's so many different tasks that defining tasks, explaining best practices to get it done the way we expect, creating a system, and then having an audit trail and a way to review. Pretty comprehensive. Now, when it seems like a super big task, a lot of people don't want to jump into it. So the starting point is just get the checklist done. Exactly to your point, Tiff, is walk the store. What do you do every day? Do that for a week. You'll have a pretty good checklist. Checklist is the perfect place to start. And then you make it better. And then you make it better. And then when people do things wrong, you ask them, was it clear? Did you understand? How can we explain it differently? And then you improve it. So the iterations are important, and you'll get to a point where new person walks through the door, you walk them through the checklist and they understand it with guidance, obviously in the beginning, but that's really what we're looking to do is formalize even the most mundane tasks that are simple in our mind because we've done them and we're creating the expectations, but communicating the expectations is the more difficult part. And then systematizing the expectations, systematizing the checklist is the next best thing. And I think we were just talking prior to jumping on about automation, and this might be a place where this kind of fits is because there's such volume to the things that have to happen on a consistent and regular basis. The cleaning, the lights on, the look of the store, the fronting and straightening of shelves. At some point after you look at your checklist, you can start to ask, well, one, what has to get done and what doesn't have to get done, right? We talked about elimination. And if there's steps getting done here that are just not important. One thing that happened recently is I ended up fixing our HVAC system and ended up changing the thermostat. And the new thermostat I never programmed, which is my fault. And I walked away from it. HVAC system's working, don't have to worry about it. And then a couple months later, an employee said, why do we have to change the temperature every morning? So it's a simple answer. It has to be set at a good retail temperature for the employees and the staff, but the staff shouldn't have to do that. It shouldn't be a task. And they self-assigned this task because it was uncomfortable. But the communication loop got broken. So I never fixed it. And this is something I can easily automate, right? You can automate we have our entry and exit lights automated for a timer. We have our outdoor parking lot lights automated on a timer. These things don't have to be thought about. They just get done. So if it's important enough and it has to be part of your routine, if you can automate something with programming your thermostat, setting a timer on your lights, whatever it is, there's certain things that you should be able to take out of the employee's hands because they already have enough to do. If you know it's important enough that it has to be done and it can be automated, either partially or completely, that would be the later step to address after we get these routines systematized and written down and tested. Sorry, that was very long winded, but I wanted to throw automation in there because I think it's an important thing that can be done with part of these guys.
No, I love it because it's something, again, I struggle with. I'm like, oh, why do we use a simple automation that you did with when we built our photo booth area is that we have the lights that kick on automatically. That's one less light that the opener has to remember to kick on and kick off at the end of the night. We have our internal light system is only 2 switches, so it's really relatively easy, and if you wanna make it through the store, you just hit the one button and then the next button. We don't have those on a timer necessarily, but it's a thing I struggle with. I'm like, "Okay, I'll just write it into the SOP. I'll write it into the checklist to just do this and not think first, can I possibly even just take that off their plate?" Since we have the home base app as our communication source for that we were able to remove the rule of you need to email or text your requests. So it's stuff that can be automated and just kind of skip over one chain that's not needed. So it's difficult to think about when you're doing it every day. You're like, oh, how hard is it to remember to turn this one light on that's over there? But if you have the capability to use technology like the Philips auto switchers or any of those types of things that exist now for smart homes or anything like that, or smart switches, take use that to your advantage and just take that off the daily checklist. The important thing to remember is that a daily routine is not a thing that your store does just on its best day. It gets it done on its worst day. No matter what the case is, all these things have to be done, whether it's been a really tough day, everybody's exhausted by the end of the day because they had a lot of receiving to do or a lot of like a busy weekend or anything. All of this gets done on a consistent basis because of the way these routines are built. So I want to jump to culture next because I know we started this whole conversation 4 weeks ago on how to develop a culture so that you can start building things off of this. Tasks create consistency and culture creates connection. So you need both in order for all of this to function. An SOP can tell someone to greet every customer. It cannot tell them how to make that customer feel genuinely welcome. The daily culture standard is the bridge between the operational checklist and the customer experience, the non task behaviors that define what your store feels like from the moment someone walks in. At Braxton's, the daily culture standard is the greeting standard. So we have greet people pretty much as soon as they walk through the door, acknowledge their existence, make them feel genuinely welcome. I believe our SOP reads, greet them as if they're a family member coming into your home or a friend coming into your home, as long as that's in a professional manner, I should say. Some people greet a little bit too casually. What's the floor presence? What does tentative but not hovering look like? How does your team member move through the store and respond to a customer's body language is huge. Most of the training up front goes to how to read people's body language. Do they walk into the front door and they hesitate? Do they look around? Do they look like they don't know what they're looking for? Or do they immediately ask you a question of where something is? That's a good indicator that they might not have been here or they might not have shopped for that product here. And you need to walk them to the product. What's the product knowledge standard for your team? What's the minimum somebody needs to know before they even go on the floor to help answer questions and have that as a routine checklist? Peer accountability, so the communication aspect, how do team members hold each other to the standard, which we use our task list for that of a process of which zone are you assigned to? What does it look like when it's actually done at the end of the day? The hardest thing that a small retailer, small business can do is course correct when you don't have these standards. Now, Dave, for an operations perspective, what do you think about the relationship between a documented standard and a felt culture? Because you can write down a greeting script, but you can't write down the warmth or the feeling of familiarity. How do we bring those things together?
Yeah, I think there's place for a strict standard and the expectation, and then there's a place for flexibility. And our employees, especially your best employees, they're probably intelligent. They have their own personalities. You hired them for a reason, good attitude, interest in the topics that you're teaching in your store, interest in serving customers. And we don't want to make them into robots, right? So many of the things that, and you mentioned this earlier, you may not think it, but so much of the stuff that we do on a daily basis is the same over and over and over again. And actually, the more we create strict standards on those things and set expectations on how we expect those things to be done, believe it or not, it gives the employees more freedom to use their personality, to be an intelligent person, to use their best judgment in those areas that you offer them flexibility. So we can use scripts or script templates that give the employee guidance and maybe minimum communication, and then teach and develop an understanding that the employee doesn't have to say this word for word. And we've run into employees they're like very literal, like, okay, you tell them this is what I want you to say. And they are going to say exactly that. And then you kind of have to like, well, it's not exactly what I wanted. I want you to add your own personality, but our our phone script is important, good greeting, good morning, Braxton's Animal Works. This is who you're calling. And then your name, Dave speaking, and then an offering. How can I help you? Very brief, very to the point. You can be a little variable obviously it's not always going to be good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You can say, hey, it's a beautiful day. Thank you for calling Braxton's. This is Dave speaking. And, what can I help you with today? We want the template structure to be the person on the phone must know that they've called the right place. So you must say Braxton's. We want the customer to know who they're speaking with. You must say their name. And then we offer an invitation, how can I help you today? Is there anything I can answer for you? And so there's a certain level of strictness on the minimum standard and then flexibility on other sides of it. Same as the greeting when a customer enters the door is we don't have a strict script. We just have a standard. When you first see the customer enter the store, you must greet them. And that's about it. You don't have to say, just have to greet it. Essentially, it's an acknowledgement. I see you, and it's an invitation to talk to me if you choose. Right. And then it moves to what Tiff was saying about body language. Are they shooting off to a part of the store that they're familiar with? Or are they looking around like they have never entered the store before? And that informs your next level of engagement. But the minimum standard is you must acknowledge and greet customer within seconds of your seeing them for the first time. So there is a way to encourage both minimum standard from a scripting standpoint while allowing personality and individuality on the employee standpoint. But we just don't want to give a ton of flexibility when things are absolutes, when things have to be done. This goes back to the sort of like, can you define your best case outcome? Right. So if we want our customers to feel welcome and we can greet them as if they're a close friend or family member when they enter the door, we believe that that's going to make them feel welcome and the outcome is satisfied. If someone walks in the door and we turn our back on them or we see them, but we don't talk to them, that's not going to make them feel welcome. So I think it's just a difference about understanding where culture has to have flexibility and individual, and then where it has to be set standard and more strict, parsing between those two. And then the rest of that is sort of like embedding the culture, as you said, through modeling. How are you doing it? How are you cultivating the culture of friendliness and engagement and whatever it is that you want to present your professionalism? How do you want to present your store to your customers? Model that behavior decide where the line is between strict structure and flexibility, and then try to sort of blend those two in those areas.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is culture standard is not the checklist. It is the daily example that you set, like your feedback you give and the behavior you reward. So let's talk about how you could possibly build these. We talked like either digital or paper. I know that, like you said, it's the best system is one that your team will actually use. But I also want to build a system that has the end in mind. I don't want to go paper if my ultimate goal is to go digital because it's a lot harder to retrain people once they get used to something. If it's like a what seems to be a parallel shift for them just to a digital world. So if I have my intention to make it digital, what tools do I want to use that I think they're more likely to use? There's no universal right answer. It's just the right tools depend on your team and what you want to do as a managerial style. The case for paper is like you have zero friction. You literally just either have a binder sitting around, it's login information, no connectivity. It's physical. You can grab it. It's harder to update for sure because you have to literally print out a new page every time you update it or write in there, mark something out, write it in there, all that stuff. If you have passwords or security issues written down, just as much a security issue there as it is inside a computer system. It pretty much works usually for any employee, rather regardless of their like tech level. Now, digital, you have what we like is like the timestamp. So if you send a note through there, it's timestamped. If you execute an automated task, it's timestamped. We can access it pretty much from anywhere. If you have a tablet, phone, computer, you don't have to be in the store under this register to grab this binder. You can kinda access it from anywhere, which is nice. When I open the store, I don't have to be logged into a computer to get that information. I can pull up the SOP on my phone to start running through the tasks. Instead of being stationary, I have to go back and check back and forth. Searchable history, all the fun things you have with using digital tools helps bring all this together. So it's totally up to you how you wanna do it. If you wanna do it paper or digitally, we prefer digitally. And you can use Google Forms. I've heard of people using Connect Team or Slack for like kind of cross team communication, documents, but having something formalized is the goal at the end of the day. Dave, what is your recommendation for a store that is starting from scratch? Like paper first to build the habit or straight to digital for the accountability trail? What's your suggestion?
I think you mentioned it before, and we were talking about it before. Is like the system that will get used is the best system, but you wouldn't believe how often a written binder just doesn't get accessed. It could be labeled on the shelf, visible. It's literally in your face, and then someone asks you, "How do I do this?" It's even though it's like a binder that says systems and it's right next to the register. And then you're going, how do I do a return? Because I think it's just not as easy. So I would always default to digital as your primary setup. And there's so many benefits, but when you're building from scratch, if you literally have nothing, is the repeatability of digital. So you can build a template that is going to be 60 to 80% the same task over task over task over task. We've talked about the SOPs and how we should have intent and we should have either steps or bullets, explanations, desired outcome. You just build a template and you have a framework that asks you a few questions. You answer the questions. Now you have an SOP and then you build your checklist. And then you just copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, give it a good title, answer the questions. Now you have a second one. And it's actually probably 10 times easier than paper just because of the repeatability. And to your point, one of the other advantages, simplicity in discovery, right? So searchability. When something's in Word documents or a spreadsheet and you can just, search or control F and type in your topic query and it comes up. You're like, oh, it's right there. Now I know how to do it. If you have to print it out because you're doing training and somebody has to walk around, you're printing a fresh first generation print, not a photocopy scan. It gets harder and harder to read. Or like you said, your handwritten notes on the side that are not getting transferred back to a master copy. There's so many advantages to digital that I would absolutely start with digital. And the only caveat is if somehow in your world digital wouldn't get used. And I think we're pretty tech forward. We have obviously point of sale system that's on computers. We use tablets for back checking receiving. I bought an extra cell phone that we just use on Wi-Fi for taking photographs and walking around the store and notating things. So we're pretty digital forward, but I think everybody has a phone in their pocket. And maybe for the owner manager, you have access to the back end, or maybe you get a device that your front staff, whether it's a fixed computer or a tablet that they can reference with the searchability in mind from a digital process. It's just so much easier. It's funny because I see notes and documents from our past history, and it's always funny because the first thing I think is like, I can't even imagine going back. It's just so difficult to imagine having to do it the way we had done it in the past on paper, page by page, handwriting stuff, checking things off versus the way we have things now. And things are just easier and honestly easier to use and more simple and straightforward and easier to refine and improve as well. So digital first in my mind.
Yeah, I know I talked about a difficulty of ours is just shift communication and things that need to be communicated maybe from the closers to the next day. And you either can leave a piece of paper behind the counter, which is our least favorite thing because usually people don't put enough information on that. A system I've been thinking about building is it basically emulates what right now we have a really good system if somebody needs to let us know something and we're not here. We call it our notes and messaging system, but it's a Google form. It sends an email to whoever it needs to tag, and then it gets dropped into a Google Sheets where we can reference and we have a history of this light bulb was out here, or like you said, the thermostat is we have to change it every day, stuff like that. That communication, I think, works pretty well. People use that system most of the time. But what we don't have in place is a good system for when customer A needs to be called back the next day for some reason. It's either on that paper behind the counter, which we don't like ultimately, or what we have is a Google Chat, which works like literally an IM chatbot message, which if you flood that with other messages, it's hard to see the information on the next shift if we have to communicate because that's like our fast communication. Like, hey, can somebody pick up this call? Whatever. That's our fast communication. So it's not very long term storing place. So I was thinking about building literally a note system emulating what we have for our management. Our retail to management is just basically retail to retail, and an email will go out every morning to our customer service that they have to check. It's part of their checklist and say, "Hey, this is the stuff that didn't get done the day before," or "This customer needs to be called." But that kind of those shift notes, but something that I'm not creating another step because they still have to check the email every day, but just to help that cross shift communication from retail to retail, because that's where I think we're lacking right now. And I know that when I come in them every morning and I see those notes on the back counter of, hey, call customer A on Wednesday, and either they didn't see the piece of paper and they get called on Thursday or something like that. It's just so frustrating. But I haven't built anything yet that withstands that. So that's something that I'm looking at focusing on
Nice.
next.
The wheels are already turning.
Yeah.
Thinking of 10 ways we can solve that problem. Just have to figure out what's the best way. That's awesome, Tiff. I love that because that's our culture of continuous improvement. And when we see a problem, we don't try to solve the immediate problem. We try to solve the root cause of the problem. That's a really good example of that idea.
Yeah, whether you're trying to make the decision between digital paper to get back on topic, but start with the end in mind. Because if your goal is to be digital so that people can access things anywhere, half the time, if you're writing it out on paper, you're probably typing it into a computer, then printing it. So it probably already is a physical. or like a digital form already. Just give employees access to the Google Drive or however you built it. I don't know any other platforms of document storage. I'm sure Microsoft has their own thing, but giving them access, then you don't even have to print. Don't waste the paper. Just it's already built there. But it's so hard to switch people from a whatever the process is, if it's a feels like a lateral move I mentioned earlier. We have a special order system that was a piece of paper written out. It was really hard for people to be like, "This is gonna be the same system digitally." We were able to make their lives easier, so it did help the process go a little bit faster on moving people over, but it definitely you'll get the resistance if you start one spot and try to make a lateral move to another spot, so if you have an end goal, try to start there. So let's talk briefly on new hires because I think you have to have a good first impression in order to get people to use these things that you're building, whether it's the SOPs, whether it's your culture, whether it's these rhythms and routines. You have to start on day one. You have to have every staff member emulating all of these things. Otherwise, it's really hard for an employee to be like, well, we didn't do it the first day. Why would we do it the second day? Being consistent, having these in place, and teaching them from day one what this looks like and what a new employee experiences in week 1 sets every expectation they will carry for as long as they work there. It's so hard to overcome day 1. So if their first week is chaotic or reactive or inconsistent, they'll learn that chaos might be the normal here, and it sets the tone for what they think and what to expect. But if it feels structured and clear and intentional, it can, 1, be way easier to retain the information you're about to give them, and they load the standards in which this place needs to operate.
I think we talked about it in SOPs stuff too, is without the written formula, is if you have different people training someone in their first week and they're contradicting each other, that's also a really bad feel for a new employee. It's very confusing and they're not sure who to believe and what's correct. So that goes back to having these standards written down.
Yeah, and also choosing the right person to train. I know when I first started, I wanted to take on most of the training of the new people because the standard I wanted to emulate and show, I felt like I represented and I wanted to do that. But being store manager, your day is kind of chaotic. So it's hard to step outside of your daily routine to do this one-off training. So letting go of the reins and having my assistant manager or my team leads take some of that training on, somebody that's in the daily routine and it's actually executing it. And my day always feels hectic, and that's more of a personal thing for me, but it's really not, but it just feels hectic. Starts with kids. I think you said that earlier. Starts with kids. But if I bring that energy to a new employee, 1, it sets their expectation of me, like, she's all over the place, she doesn't have her stuff together, and then also of the store. So I being mindful of who's doing your training and that they emulate your routines consistently and in the best light and the best culture fit is a good way of putting it. So putting all of this together, I want you to ask yourself, do you have written open checklists that an employee can complete to your standards without asking any questions? If not, let's build it tomorrow. And do you have a written closing checklist that also matches that, that sets the opening team up for a clean start? Do you have an opening checklist and then each morning it still seems so hectic? No matter how many times you refine that checklist, it's probably because the closing checklist needs to be checked in on. Is there a shift handoff system? I've seen stores use a yellow notebook and write down everything and cross things out as they're not relevant, but not my favorite, but it works for them. But they have some way to transfer that information. It's in one spot. And that's what I was talking about earlier, wanting to set up with our email system with our shifts. Have you written down your daily non-negotiables? So for us, it was making sure the email and customers were taken care of and responded to. Special orders were called and referenced, all of these things. Anything that's a non-negotiable, the tasks that happen every day, regardless of what comes up, do we have that documented? Have you defined your culture standard? Not just the tasks, but the behaviors that the customer experiences. Next week, we're going to jump into our customer experience and how to build a customer experience that people actually come back for. So all of this stuff, everything we've talked about this last month has been how do we make a repeatable customer experience that people want to come back and shop with? This is how you build a store that runs without you, not by working harder, not by being the most important person on the floor, but by building a daily rhythm so clear and consistent that the store knows what to do even when you're not there at all. That's how we make it our store not dependent on us. That's the goal. That is what everything in the series has been building up towards. And this pretty much closes out our operation series. We've spent about 4 weeks building an engine. Next week, we start who the engine is actually built for. Next week, we start with customer experience and retention because none of the SPs and the checklists that we have built or these daily routines or the delegation frameworks matter if the person walking through the door does not feel like they can come back, does not feel like they want to come back. So we will see you guys next Wednesday.